Today, I want to discuss a topic that goes all the way back 10 years ago. The enigma surrounding the demo would be revealed that this was just a taste of what the new entry for the Silent Hill franchise would have to offer. Yep, this game would be called Silent Hills. The dreams of many would be crushed when Konami removed PT from the PlayStation Store in April 2015. Hideo Kojima, the game's director, was no longer with Konami and Silent Hills was cancelled. This did not stop many indie game developers from creating their own PT-inspired games. The very first successor would be Allison Road. Pre-alpha footage was released online in July 2015. A year later, the project would be scrapped. The creator of Allison Road planned to continue with the game, but the last we ever heard about it was in 2017. Rest in peace. But not all was lost. There have been PT-inspired games, and that is what I came to discuss. First off, I'll briefly talk about the games that were the first prototypes, Layers of Fear and Infliction. Layers of Fear was a walking simulator more than anything. We, as the player, roam around aimlessly while collecting certain items to finish a portrait, our masterpiece. That's not to say that it was a bad game, far from it. The visuals are stunning, even comparing them to games released in 2024. For a game that was released 10 years ago, it still holds up. Another game, Infliction, just like Layers of Fear, is a walking simulator. While Infliction dives more into its narrative, finding diary entries all around the house, it lacks a certain element of horror. I really wanted to like this game, and upon playing it 3 times I felt disappointed. Infliction has many jump scares, but that's about it. There are many references to classic horror films, such as Hellraiser and Evil Dead, but it just feels so out of place. With Layers of Fear, there were elements of genuine terror, foreboding dread. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, clenching. Infliction, however, can only offer cheap scares, which is why I won't be diving into it. Instead, I want to talk about a worthy contender released around the same time as Infliction, and that is Visage. Just like Infliction, Visage was released in October 2018. However, there was a catch. The game was in its early access stage, which meant you could only play the first of the 4 chapters. The second chapter, known as the Dolores chapter, was released the following year. By 2020, the game would be fully released. Visage has a sanity meter, much like Eternal Darkness and the Amnesia franchise, the only difference being that the Visage sanity meter is a bit janky along with its inventory system. The rules are pretty simple. Any spooky stuff happens or staying in the dark too long, Dwayne's sanity drops. In Visage, we play as Dwayne Anderson, a family man. The intro to the game is absolutely jarring with its nauseating first-person perspective. You could say the game starts off with a bang. Starting off, we get a voicemail from our concerned neighbour Rose, who is worried that she hasn't seen Dwayne leave the house in over 3 weeks.
Hello, Dwayne. It's Rose, your neighbor. I know it's late, and I know that I tend to be a little anxious about small things. I apologize for that, but I'm getting a bit worried. I haven't seen you out of the house in about 3 weeks.
At Casa Anderson, we are free to explore the house to our heart's content. However, once you interact with a key item, we start a new chapter. For the sake of keeping this linear with its original timeline, we'll cover the first chapter, Lucy's chapter. Once the chapter starts, we enter our daughter's room. A picture in a wardrobe shows a shadowy figure knocking. Upon interacting with the wall, you can hear someone knock back. In the living room, the TV shows a flickering figure. At this point, I'd be smashing every window trying to get the fuck out.
Better start running, running, running. Sprinting! Yes, I just gotta keep sprinting!
But for the sake of the story, down to the basement we go. For the record, this house is huge. You can easily get lost. There's no map, so before starting the first chapter, I would find the keys and unlock all the doors. Grab everything. You're gonna need it. Once we're in the basement, a camera flashes, indicating that we should take it. And this is where things really kick off. Using the camera, we can see crayon markings, which tell us where to go next. And what's that there at the end of the corridor? Oh dear sweet baby Jesus. From here on out, it's hunting season, and we're the main course. The antagonists of each chapter can hurt us, resulting in a game over. There's a manual save system, so you may want to utilize that. The markings eventually lead us to a glowing red door, which takes us to a treehouse. Inside we find Lucy's drawings. Seems like Lucy made a new friend. That's nice. In Lucy's drawings, it's depicted that Lucy was treated for an unspecified mental illness. A sinister voice plays through the radio, telling Lucy to do it. At this point, we're not sure what it's telling us to do. Waking up back at the house, Lucy has decided to punk us by removing all of the light switches. Classic. Back on the other side of the house, we go into our daughter's room again, interacting with the drawing of a door. We can venture into a new area, a room filled with bird cages and other junk, a real hoarder's paradise. For the rest of the chapter, there will be minimal lighting, so keep that lighter and camera in each hand. Finding a key, we are able to progress and finally meet Lucy's friend. Back at the house, we get a mannequin jaw and say, "This looks oddly familiar." Turns out it belongs to that creepy mannequin in the basement. From here, we use the wardrobe to travel to a different version of the house. There, we gotta avoid Lucy's friend tearing us a new one while trying to navigate through the place. We are able to return to our house, making our way through literal piles of trash. But where to go next? Endlessly running through the dark house, there's only one lit room, and that's the bathroom, so in we go. We get locked in, so we run ourselves a nice relaxing bath. In a flashback, it's revealed Lucy's treatments weren't working, causing arguments between her parents.
Why would she do that? She loved Pico.
You heard the diagnostic. She could be in danger. We don't have much of a choice.
I know all that. But who the hell prescribes syringes for a child? I don't want their help anymore. She's only been worsening ever since we went to these doctors. Imaginary friends and all these weird behaviors.
She killed Pico, for fuck's sake!
Now it's time for the jaw-dropping finale. Looks like Lucy left us a parting gift. Her jaw. Thanks, Lucy. At the end of each chapter, we're given a key item which is stored in the progress room so we can continue with the story. Now, let's jump into the next chapter. In terms of scares, Dolores' chapter is a bit more forgiving. At least we get to keep our lights on, which is very nice of Dolores. We get a new key item, this time a key with a little mirror on it, which opens the door to a locked room. Mirrors in this chapter are a key theme, using them as doorways to other places in order to progress with the story. A thump from the attic suggests there's something there, but the handle is out of reach, so we gotta find something to help us out. A silhouette of a man beckons us to follow him, eventually finding a hook to reach the attic. From the attic, we are in the master bedroom, but it looks a little different. In the room, a bassinet is missing all of its toys, so we're off on a scavenger hunt. We get this massive mallet to crack some mirrors, but sadly, it cannot be used to bonk the ghosts. The chapter has nods to the Silent Hill franchise, such as the gallows puzzle from Silent Hill 2 and the chain doors from Silent Hill 4. I feel like Dolores was a little less menacing than Lucy, but it could be that little creepy children are always a lot more threatening. Dolores just enjoys a bit of sundowning and chasing you every once in a while. With all of the audio cassettes left by Dolores' husband George, we listen to his accounts of their tragic story.
Dolores' symptoms are aggravating. Doctors tell me it's become very hard to pinpoint the exact disorder. They tell me she's got symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, dementia, and more.
They were an elderly couple with a baby in tow. Dolores was showing signs of dementia and George was a supportive husband. At first I thought the baby was a figment of Dolores' imagination. However, a recording confirmed that the baby was in fact real.
How am I supposed to work, take care of the baby, and deal with her dementia all at the same time?
Eventually, we learn that Dolores butchered poor George because she believed he was trying to poison her favourite cup of Earl Grey. After collecting all of the toys, we get a key which opens the music box and we get ourselves a nice record. Playing it, a new door opens. This is actually my favourite puzzle in the entire game. You walk up different staircases to your destination. Oh, and you can also fall. If you're going in the right direction, the music will play as normal. However, if you take the wrong path, you'll get this creepy feedback instead. Making our way through, we finally see Dolores' end, which I gotta say, it's even more tragic than Lucy's. We still don't know whatever happened to the baby. We're given a brand spanking new key item in the progress room. We can finally start a new chapter. But hang on, wait. There's some new added content that we gotta discuss first, and that is a comic book. Collecting the 4 pages of the comic, we piece some of the story together. The comic revolves around Rose, Dwayne's neighbour, who called us at the start of the game. When starting a new chapter, Rose will continue calling, becoming more and more unhinged.
She'll take your body, and then she'll take your mind. Dwayne, oh Dwayne. The years just pile on, don't they? Time is a funny little bitch. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Time just keeps on ticking. But me, I've wasted enough time in this house. It's time I get out there and live.
In one of the comic panels, there's a clear emphasis that the tap water may be contaminated. At some point between 1970 and 1985, Rose went absolutely batty and killed her husband Frank, letting his corpse marinate in the tub while she drinks his bath water. Nice. There's also a little more content about the residents we've encountered thus far, giving us the dates of when they lived at the house. In 1961, Lucy and her family lived at the house until her death. A year later, in 1962, Dolores and her husband George move in with their baby. A mysterious man named Lewis Taylor lived at the house in 1965. Finally, the last known resident was Rakan, a rugby player who lived at the house in 1970. And that is our next unfortunate victim. Rakan's chapter is technically the last chapter, but not quite. You may have noticed if you played the fully released game that at the end of each chapter you were also given videotapes with different labels. There's a total of 7 tapes, with 4 of them found in the house. I left these until I finished all of the chapters, so we'll get back to those. Interacting with the crutch next to the front door, we witness Rakan's chapter, the last known resident to meet a gruesome end at the house now owned by the Andersons. Rakan suffered from scopophobia, an intense fear of being watched or looked at. Rakan found bugs planted in his house, which led him to become more and more paranoid. Understandably, of course.
What? What the fuck is this? Oh, it better not be what I think it is! Bastards. What is this? Who the fuck are you?
When a dark figure approached Rakan, he began shooting, eventually being attacked by the figure, which ended with him becoming institutionalized. From here, we get to poke some eyeballs, which open doorways for us to travel from a house to a hospital. Rakan's chapter feels a lot shorter than the first 2. Also, the story wasn't as captivating, but I enjoyed the different scenery this time around. The hospital is peak creepy, and these faceless dudes are definitely the highlight of this chapter. Just look at them. It seems like Rakan knows who Dwayne is.
Fuck you, Dwayne.
And while Dolores addressed Dwayne by his name,
See you soon, Dwayne.
Rakan would love nothing more than to turn Dwayne's head into puree using his crutch. It's assumed at this point that Dwayne knew the previous victims of the house and that he may have been responsible for their demise.
You ruined my life.
Making our way through the hospital, we learn that the same figure that attacked Rakan is also stalking Dwayne. This is the only chapter to feature a kind of final boss battle. When facing off against Rakan, we play a game of cat and mouse. Finding a sharp knife, we can take the eye out and walk down this meaty mess. Back at the hospital, we find black goopy substances everywhere. It looks like the same stuff that was on the man covered in tar that we met earlier. Travelling down, we come across the room where Rakan stayed at the hospital and learn that he was due to be released.
So, Rakan, right? I'm here with good news. Based on your behavior and recovery in the past few months, you'll be ready to leave and go home. Sounds good, right?
However, before he could leave, Rakan was trapped in a room that is somehow familiar.
I knew it! Oh, they're in big trouble now! With everything I know, I'll definitely take them down! You hear me, fuckers? I'm on to you! Hey, what are you doing? Who sent you? Wait! No! Fuck!
And with that, we come to an end of Rakan's chapter, where we are rewarded with another tape. At the house, there are more of those tar splotches on the wall, and the tar guy likes to spawn out of those. So by now, Dwayne should have all of the tapes by completing each chapter and looking through the house to find them. We can view them using the VCR in the living room. Each tape shows us where to look. It also tells us the story of Dwayne this time around. By completing each segment, we are given a shard which is needed to complete a mask. We can view it in the progress room and see how it's coming along. Also, you are not safe in this room. Most of the tapes show Dwayne's mental decline, him spiraling into alcoholism and drug abuse, causing a further rift between him and his family. His wife, Claire, says this.
I'm only with you because you have money. It's probably blood money, but I don't care. I don't care about you. If you want to die, I'll happily oblige.
It looks like Dwayne worked for a company which was responsible for administering people with experimental drugs, causing them to hallucinate. All of the victims of the house had pre-existing mental conditions which worsened with the treatments that they were given. In a tape labelled Affliction, we enter a water plant where a man named Lewis Taylor worked, along with Dwayne. Lewis lived at the same house in 1965, where he eventually met his demise at the hands of the company he worked for. But why? Was he willing to blow the whistle on the whole operation? There isn't much to the motive why Lewis had to go, and it can only be speculated, but I'm guessing the guilt got to him, just like it did to Dwayne many years later, hence the alcohol and self-medicating. Going further into the plant, you can see all of the bodies in the water, more than likely a reference to all of the victims and lives lost due to what Dwayne and his company did. With the mask now complete, we put it on and the house is different. There's daylight and a majority of the doors and hallways are blocked, so we make our way where we can, to the same room where the intro played out. A cutscene shows that Dwayne sees his family once again, finally reuniting with them. This is considered the good ending. Dwayne had seen and experienced firsthand the torment that he had caused, costing the lives of others, his family included. Another ending, the bad ending we'll call it. Dwayne can smash a wall which takes him to the same room as before. A gun with 6 bullets sits on the table, and each time he uses the gun, he wakes up like before. When the gun is empty, he'll use the gun once more, and this time he wakes up in a well. The same well from the Affliction video. The ending is left to our interpretation. I'm guessing this is considered as the easy way out, that Dwayne would rather repeat the same thing over and over again than facing what is ahead of him. This ending can be achieved at any point, even before you start any of the chapters. Now we've reached the end of Visage. The game was damn near perfect, except for a few glitches here and there, so I'll be generous and give it 4 out of 5 Kojimas. And finally, let's talk about a game that is seriously underrated, and that is Madison. Madison was released in 2022. The game was generally favoured by critics and the audience alike. I absolutely loved the game. Although it had its similarities to PT, Madison ditched the worst husband of the year trapped in limbo trope, as seen in other PT-inspired games that I've discussed so far. Now, let's talk about Madison. The player awakens to find themselves trapped in a room. Our main protagonist is Luca, a 16-year-old boy. We learn that Luca has been a very, very naughty boy indeed, with his father yelling at Luca through a locked door, but Luca has no recollection of what has happened.
What the hell were you thinking? What in the hell crossed your mind?
To get out of our confinement, we venture into our grandfather's house through a tight corridor. From there, we experience a series of paranormal events. In a ritualistic room, we find a Polaroid camera gifted to us for our 16th birthday. In order to progress with the story, we take pictures of certain key items and places, which play an important part. Luca finds a tape recorded by a priest who consulted with Luca's dad. The tape is labelled as Tape 1. There are different stages to the possession gripping Luca, and that will be explored further in the other tapes. In the basement, we descend down a well, which is ginormous in its size. There, we find a police officer's walkie-talkie, which gives us a bit of info into the story of the titular character, Madison Hale.
Officer Russell here. June 17th, 1987, 5:27 a.m. I am now entering Madison Hale's basement.
Madison was a 43-year-old woman who mutilated and killed 4 people before being gunned down by the officer. The room is flooded. We see floating limbs about, belonging to the victims. The walkie-talkie works as a sensor. When you walk around the sealed-off area, the light will flash red. There we take a photo of a speedy apparition, and eventually, we are treated to a very nice jump scare. Back at Granddad's house, we make our way to an attic and find a photo puzzle to solve in order to progress further. Acquiring a key to our grandparents' bedroom, we find diary entries written by our grandmother Elizabeth, who detailed her experiences about an unknown entity and how it all tied with her eventual blindness. In 1972, Elizabeth purchased a book titled Blue Knees for her son Johnny, Luca's dad, and shortly after began to lose her sight. Elizabeth blamed the book. However, her husband dismissed her claims completely, leaving her defenseless in every step of the way. In the bathroom, we inspect a mirror. Rotating it, a message appears. Blue Knees is real. Now let's hope our basic math skills won't fail us, because it's time to figure out the attic puzzle. We are given a clue about the puzzle simply by peeking into a hole in the wall, with the key number 43. Upon removing the pictures and taking a photo of the wall where the pictures were, we add or subtract the numbers and ages that are written on the photos. Once it's done correctly, the wall that blocked our entry has now unravelled. In a labyrinthine tunnel-way, we follow Madison's apparition, which guides us to our next destination, a cathedral. In the cathedral, there are 3 different time periods that we venture into: 1951, 1987, and 2022. Taking pictures of these years teleports us to different eras where we solve a candle puzzle. When teleporting to 1951, we come across a confessional booth, and there we hear a weeping confession from a woman named Nancy. Nancy spills the tea about her husband, Hans.
I did it. I finally did it. You have to understand. It was like living with a monster. I was in charge of a gas chamber. He took so many innocent lives. He destroyed them. He just... Who could do that? There were days I would look into his eyes and I would see a void. Emptiness. Just nothing looking back at me. He was already dead. Only God knows how many lives he had taken, but anymore. I made sure he would not hurt another person. I made sure that he suffered.
She learned that he was a war criminal during the Second World War. Upon finding out about Hans's misdeeds, Nancy killed him. From here, Hans begins chasing Luca. If we're caught, it's game over. With all of the candles placed accordingly, we hear a bell in the distance. It's our cue to get our butt up there. With the key to the confessional booth, we enter it, but no one is in there. A plaque with Hans's name appears, but we only need to borrow the letter I to place into Madison's plaque. Grabbing Madison's skull, we are trapped in a long corridor with the exits sealed off. Running from one end to the other, old mate Hans catches up and we got a bolt. Finally, we are back in the attic. From here, we make our way to our grandparents' room where we find the key to the basement. In the basement, we get a crowbar, and now we can fish out our grandmother's wedding ring. Going back to the ritual room, there are now the same Virgin Mary statues as in the basement. With all of the 4 items needed, the wedding ring, Madison's skull, and both of the sunbox and moonbox tins, Luca can place them accordingly on the platters of the Virgin Mary statues. A book sits on the chair that dives into Madison's ritual. From here, we get a triangular key. Earlier on in the game, we are able to snatch one of them. However, we need 2 in order to open the garage. Inside, we open the rusted moonbox. The contents are pretty gruesome. The snuff snapshots of Madison's victims. Well, parts of them. Thanks to Luca's visions, we are led to a crypt. The crypt has 4 floors, each representing Madison's victims. Figuring out the names of each victim, we enter the elevator to travel. Each time we are given a scoop into Madison's backstory. As we already know, Madison killed 4 people before meeting her demise. But her first 2 victims were both her mother and father, Robert and Judith Hale. Completing the crypt puzzle, a new floor appears with a mirror. Taking a photo, we're given a key to unlock a grandpa's workshop, a room full of clocks. In order to unlock the door in the back of the room, we gotta find clocks around the house with specific times and insert them into correct places. Madison can be seen periodically trying to spook us, but don't worry, she can only hurt us by giving us a heart attack. Once the clocks are done and dusted, we get a new item, and it's another clock. During the game, Luca gets visions of certain places where we use the camera to get a sequence of 4 numbers. This all ties into the ending. Unlocking the safe in the study, we are given a key to Johnny's room. In the room, a riddle gives us a hint on how to solve the next puzzle. From here, we get to see the aforementioned Blooney's book, and it's real nightmare fuel. We are now teleported to what looks like the house back in 1972. There are a number of gramophones placed in different rooms of the house, cranking them to play the Blooney's tune, and it's an absolute banger. Cranking the gramophones, there is a small chance it'll shoot out an eyeball. We need 2 of those pretty peepers. The only problem now is that if you play the tune, Bloonies can attack us, just like Hans did at the Cathedral. In order to drive Bloonies away, quickly take a picture of him before he pounces on Luca. You'll hear Bloonies lurking about, so grip onto that camera, 'cause oh lord, he comin'. With the 2 eyeballs retrieved and tossed into the crack of the floor, Luca gets smacked around by Bloonies and is hurt in the process. Luca is now unable to use his camera, so we stumble to the ritual room. With each number revealed, we input the code opening the hatch. A pedestal with the ash remains of Elizabeth are revealed. The urn falls down and Luca places his camera in front of him, steps onto the chair and hangs himself. He is the 7th and last sacrifice needed for the ritual, although that gasp at the end may suggest something otherwise. The ending of the game is left ambiguous and up to the player's interpretation. There are also some things I'd like to talk about before we wrap up. As far as the story suggests, Elizabeth, Luca's grandmother, and her husband had only one child, their son Johnny. In 1972, Elizabeth's diary entry states that she purchased a book called Bloonies for Johnny. Shortly after reading it, Elizabeth was impacted by losing her eyesight. Shortly after, Elizabeth passed away and her husband, feeling guilt and remorse after not taking Elizabeth's claims seriously, tried contacting her through a medium, but was unsuccessful. We know that Madison's camera was the conduit for the possession to take a hold of Luca, in which he continued Madison's dirty work for the 7 sacrifices. Madison managed to gather 4 victims for the 7 sacrifices. However, she died before she could finish it. Then, 35 years later, she possessed Luca, who would finish the ritual. Luca was successful in killing both his mother and sister, but not his father, who had him confined in the room at the start of the game. In Luca's journal, a drawing depicts that Johnny was intended to be the last victim for the ritual, but when that failed, Luca took his own life instead. But did it work? Now let's talk a bit about the Goring family. So how do the Gorings fit into the story? Well, my interpretation is that they were not only related to Madison, but that they were her birth parents. It would make a lot of sense. Madison was born in 1944, a year before World War II would come to its end. It is possible that Hans met Nancy either in Germany or perhaps he had already run off to Argentina to save his bacon from being persecuted. Nancy didn't know of Hans's history, and upon finding out, she killed him, where she would later be imprisoned for it. I'm guessing with no other relatives around, Madison was placed in the care of Robert and Judith Hale, who would become her first 2 victims. Only replaying the game a few days ago, I may be a little bit biased, but god damn it, I'm giving it 5 out of 5 Kojimas. And with that, we've reached the ending. Thanks for watching. If there are any other games you'd like me to venture into, drop a comment below. Also, come on, like, share and subscribe. You know you want to.
I'll be your friend.
I'll catch you guys later on the other side.